book about fallen angels, giants, cosmic secrets, judgment, and a man who vanished from Genesis, disappeared from most Bibles, then survived in Ethiopia and reappeared beside the Dead Sea. A cave near the Dead Sea is not where most people expect a forgotten religious world to speak again. In the 20th century, fragments from Qumran showed that stories connected with Enoch were not a late medieval curiosity. They belonged to the intense, imaginative Jewish literature of the Second Temple period. Long before modern debates about lost books, ancient readers were already asking what happened before the flood, why evil spread so violently, and whether heaven had secrets humans were never meant to touch. First Enoch is not one neat book by one author. It is an anthology gathered around a mysterious figure from Genesis, Enoch, the seventh patriarch, the man who walked with God and then disappeared. Around that short biblical sentence, later writers built a vast world of angels, watchers, stars, calendars, judgment, and hope. The surprise is not just that the book exists. The surprise is how much it influenced people who were trying to understand the Bible itself. Enoch survived because it gave language to questions Genesis leaves almost unbearably open. In Genesis, Enoch barely appears. He lives, fathers Methuselah, walks with God, and then is gone because God took him. That is almost all the Bible says, but the blank space is enormous. Did Enoch die? Was he taken into heaven alive? What did he see? If he walked with God before the flood, did he learn why the world was breaking apart? Ancient writers loved that kind of opening. They took the quiet figure in the genealogy and turned him into a heavenly traveler. In First Enoch, he becomes a scribe, messenger, witness, and interpreter. Angels show him the architecture of the cosmos. He sees places of punishment and rest. He hears how heavenly order judges earthly violence. This is one reason the book feels both strange and familiar. It is not trying to replace Genesis. It is trying to enter the silence Genesis leaves behind. It asks what kind of knowledge might belong to the man who did not simply die, and why that knowledge would matter to a world heading toward flood. The world before the flood is one of the strangest zones in biblical imagination. Genesis gives only a few clues. Human life stretches across impossible ages. Violence increases. Then comes the brief, unsettling notice about the sons of God, the daughters of humans, and the Nephilim. The text moves quickly, almost as if it expects the reader to know more than it says. First Enoch slows that moment down. It treats the flood not as an isolated disaster, but as the climax of a moral collapse. The book wants to know why the earth became filled with violence. It wants to know how evil spread with such force. It wants to know why judgment could be described as terrible and still be understood as necessary. That is the setting of the Enochic imagination, not curiosity for its own sake, but crisis. The writers are looking backward before Noah in order to speak about their own present. They live in a world of empire, pressure, corruption, and uncertainty. By telling a story before the flood, they are asking what happens when heaven, earth, power, and knowledge fall out of order. The most famous section is often called the Book of the Watchers. It expands one of the Bible's most cryptic passages. Genesis says the sons of God saw the daughters of humans, took wives, and fathered the Nephilim. First Enoch turns that brief notice into a full drama. Heavenly beings descend, bind themselves by an oath, cross a boundary, and teach forbidden arts to human beings. The story is not only about desire, it is about knowledge without wisdom. Weapons, cosmetics, sorcery, signs of the heavens, and secret techniques enter human society as gifts that become poison. Violence grows. The earth itself cries out. Then Enoch is drawn into the case. The fallen watchers want him to intercede. They ask the righteous human to carry their petition upward, but the answer from heaven is not rescue, it is judgment. In this world, evil is not explained as one simple human mistake. It is a cosmic breach with consequences that reach the ground. The watchers were meant to watch. Instead, they take, teach, and corrupt. One of the most modern feeling parts of First Enoch is its suspicion of knowledge detached from moral order. The watchers do not merely break a sexual boundary, they teach. They transmit skills. Some of those skills sound practical. Metalwork, ornament, cosmetics, signs in the sky, the cutting of roots, enchantments, and secret arts. The point is not that every craft is evil. The point is that power arrives without restraint. In the story, human beings learn how to intensify desire, violence, status, and control. The gifts of the Watchers become technologies of domination. What looks like advancement becomes acceleration toward collapse. That is why this ancient text still feels sharp. It is not anti-intellectual. Enoch himself is a figure of knowledge, but he receives knowledge through obedience and revelation, not through theft and appetite. The Watchers give knowledge as an act of rebellion. Enoch receives knowledge as a witness. The contrast matters. First Enoch is asking whether humans can handle power when the moral world underneath them is already breaking. It is an old question, but it has not aged. Modern readers often stop at the giants because the image is so cinematic. But in First Enoch, the giants are not there for spectacle. They are symptoms. They show what happens when heaven and earth are mixed in the wrong way. The offspring of the Watchers devour resources, turn on humanity, and finally turn on each other. The world becomes predatory. That makes the flood story feel different. In Genesis, the flood comes because violence fills the earth. In First Enoch, that violence has a backstory. Human corruption matters, but it has also been intensified by powers that abandon their place. The result is a darker moral universe than many readers expect. Judgment is not presented as arbitrary anger. It is the answer to a world where boundaries, bodies, knowledge, and power have been abused. The giants make visible what unchecked violence does. They consume the world that produced them. Beneath the strange size of the story is a serious question. What happens when appetite becomes civilization's organizing principle? First Enoch gives the earth a voice. The violence is not treated as private wrongdoing only. Blood spills into the ground. Creation itself becomes a witness. The cries rise upward, and the heavenly court responds. This is one of the book's strongest ideas. Injustice is not invisible just because the powerful control the surface of events. That theme connects First Enoch to the broader apocalyptic imagination. Apocalyptic writing often begins with a painful observation. The world as we see it does not seem fair. The violent prosper. The righteous suffer. Empires win. The dead cannot speak. Ordinary history looks unfinished. Enochic literature answers by widening the frame. There is a visible world, but there is also a hidden court. There are human rulers, but there are also watchers, angels, records, storehouses, and decrees. There is delay, but not absence. The flood in this telling is not only destruction, it is a grim form of repair. That does not make the story gentle, it makes it morally charged. The book insists that a broken world cannot simply continue forever. Enoch's role in the Watcher's story is unusual. He is not the rebel and he is not the judge. He is the messenger. The fallen Watchers ask him to write a petition. They know they have crossed a line, but they still hope for mercy. Enoch carries the matter upward, then receives a dream vision and a verdict. He returns with the answer. There will be no peace for them. That moment gives Enoch a strange authority. He is human, yet he moves between realms. He writes, speaks, sees, and reports. He becomes a scribe of heavenly judgment. This matters because Second Temple Jewish literature often treats writing as sacred memory. Scrolls preserve what ordinary power wants to bury. Records keep account when empires rewrite events. A scribe can become a witness against chaos. Enoch is not powerful in the way the Watchers are powerful. He does not descend by force. He does not seize forbidden knowledge. He is shown what he needs to see, and then he testifies. That is a different model of authority, not domination but faithful witness. Enoch's journeys do not read like ordinary travel. They read like a guided tour through a moral cosmos. He sees storehouses of winds, paths of stars, mountains of precious stone, places where souls wait, and gates through which heavenly bodies move. To modern ears, some of this can sound like fantasy. To ancient readers, it was a way of saying that the universe is ordered, watched, and accountable. The landscapes are not random wonders. They teach. The cosmos itself becomes evidence. If the sun and moon keep appointed courses, if winds and stars have boundaries, then rebellion is not the truth of reality. Disorder may dominate the human scene for a time, but the deeper structure is order. This is one reason Enochic visions can feel overwhelming. They pile image upon image because they are trying to expand the reader's sense of scale. Human violence is real, but it is not ultimate. The world is larger than the tyrant, larger than the corrupt city, larger than the generation that thinks it can escape judgment. Enoch sees the hidden architecture behind the visible crisis. One major part of the Enochic tradition is astronomical. It cares about the movements of the sun and moon, the structure of time, and the calendar by which sacred days are kept. That may sound technical, but calendars were never just scheduling tools. They decided when a community worshipped, fasted, celebrated, and remembered. A calendar could mark identity. It could separate one group from another. It could say, we are keeping time the way heaven keeps time. In First Enoch, heavenly order is not abstract. The paths of the lights matter because they reveal a universe governed by measure. Time is not a shapeless flow. It has gates, seasons, circuits, and accountability. For communities under pressure, that could be powerful. If rulers control land, taxes, armies, and courts, they may still not control sacred time. A community can resist by keeping a calendar, telling a story, and trusting that the hidden order is more real than the public disorder. So the astronomical material is not a boring appendix. It is part of the same argument as the Watcher's story. Heaven has order. Earth is judged by it. The Enochic cosmos is full of boundaries. There are places for winds, stars, waters, souls, angels, and rebels. There are appointed paths and forbidden crossings. The Watcher's crime is terrible because they abandon their appointed place. The stars that disobey their order become images of judgment. Even the architecture of heaven teaches discipline. This can sound rigid to modern ears, but in the book's moral imagination, boundary is what protects creation. When powerful beings ignore their place, the weak suffer. When knowledge moves without wisdom, violence spreads. When time is corrupted, worship and memory are distorted. So Enoch's tours are not just sightseeing. They are lessons in placement. Everything belongs somewhere. Everything answers to something. Nothing is finally outside the reach of the Creator's order. That is also why the book is so interested in prisons, pits, and waiting places. Judgment is spatial. The wicked are not only condemned in theory, they are put somewhere. The righteous dead are not forgotten. They wait somewhere. The hidden world has structure, and that structure is meant to comfort the faithful and terrify the violent. Another part of First Enoch, often called the parables or similitudes, speaks of a chosen figure associated with judgment, righteousness, and the phrase Son of Man. This is one reason the book matters for students of early Judaism and Christianity. The New Testament uses Son of Man language, especially in the Gospels. First Enoch shows that ancient Jewish readers could imagine a heavenly, vindicating figure before later Christian theology took shape. But caution matters here. First Enoch is a collection, and its sections are debated. Scholars do not date every part the same way. The parables are especially discussed because no fragment of that section have been identified among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Still, the broader point stands. Enochic literature gives us a window into apocalyptic expectation. The hope that hidden righteousness will be revealed, oppressors will be judged, and history will not end with the powerful writing the final line. The Son of Man language belongs to that world of vindication. It imagines a day when the unseen court becomes visible, and the victims of history are not treated as footnotes. One reason First Enoch can be confusing is that it is not a single smooth composition. It is usually discussed as a collection of major sections. The Book of the Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Dream Visions, and the Epistle of Enoch. These parts differ in style, emphasis, and probably date. They were gathered around Enoch because he had become the ideal figure for heavenly revelation. That anthology character is important. It means we should not force every part to answer the same question in the same way. Some sections focus on angels and giants. Some focus on astronomy and calendar. Some retell history through symbolic vision. Some offer ethical warnings to sinners and encouragement to the righteous. Together, they show a tradition developing over time. Enoch becomes a shelf of related writings, not a single author's diary. This also helps explain why the book had such a complicated afterlife. Different communities could value different parts. Some readers were drawn to the Watchers, others to judgment, others to calendar, wisdom, or heavenly secrets. The book survived as a library of apocalyptic imagination. If First Enoch was so influential, why is it not in most Bibles? The short answer is canon. Jewish and Christian communities did not all draw the boundaries of Scripture in the same way, and those boundaries hardened over time. First Enoch was read, quoted, admired, and disputed. But for most Jewish groups and most Christian churches, it did not become canonical Scripture. There is one famous exception that matters deeply. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tuahido tradition preserved Enoch as part of its biblical heritage. That preservation is why the complete text survived in Ge'ez, the classical Ethiopic language, when the work was otherwise known only through fragments, quotations, and translations. The Book of Jude in the New Testament also echoes Enochic material, which kept the text from disappearing completely in Christian memory. So the story is not a simple tale of suppression. It is a story of different canons, different languages, and one tradition preserving what others left at the edge. The edges of a canon are often where history becomes most visible. For many centuries, the full Book of Enoch was known to most Western scholars only indirectly. There were quotations, references, and fragments in other languages, but the complete work survived in the Ethiopic tradition. That fact should change how we tell the story. Enoch was not simply lost and then rediscovered by modern Europeans. It was preserved by a living Christian tradition with its own canon, language, liturgy, and memory. The Ge'ez manuscripts matter because they carry a text that might otherwise have been far more broken. They also remind us that the history of the Bible is not only a Greek, Latin, or European story. Sacred literature traveled through Africa, the Middle East, and many linguistic worlds. When modern scholars study First Enoch, they often compare Ethiopic manuscripts with Greek, Aramaic, and other witnesses. That comparison is difficult, but it is also what makes the book so fascinating. It has crossed languages and communities. The survival of Enoch is not just an accident. It is a chain of copying, reverence, and use. Someone kept reading it. Someone kept writing it. Someone kept it alive. The Dead Sea Scroll changed the way modern people talk about Enoch. Before the Qumran discoveries, it was easier to imagine First Enoch as a strange text on the margins. The Aramaic fragments from the Dead Sea region showed that Enochic traditions were circulating in Jewish contexts before and around the time of early Christianity. That does not make the whole book canonical for everyone. It does make it historically serious. Fragments are humbling evidence. They do not give us everything. They give us torn edges, broken lines, partial witnesses, and hard questions. But sometimes fragments are enough to change the map. They show that Enoch was not just a later curiosity. It belonged to the world of scribes, sectarian communities, apocalyptic expectation, and scriptural interpretation. People copied it because it mattered. This is why careful history is more interesting than hype. The claim is not that a secret Bible was hidden from the world. The stronger claim is that ancient Judaism was more diverse, more imaginative, and more textually rich than many modern readers assume. Qumran did not invent Enoch's importance. It made that importance harder to ignore. The Book of Enoch is often marketed today as if it were a hidden key that unlocks everything. That is the least interesting way to read it. Its real value is better than a conspiracy. It lets us hear ancient Jews thinking out loud about evil, angels, empire, time, judgment, and hope. It shows that the world around the Bible was crowded with interpretation. People did not only receive sacred stories, they wrestled with them, expanded them, and used them to ask what kind of universe they lived in. Read carefully. Enoch does not flatten the Bible. It adds depth to the background. It explains why a tiny line in Genesis could become a library, why apocalyptic imagination mattered, and why the question of justice felt cosmic. The book survived because it gave readers language for a world that felt broken, but not abandoned. That may be why Enoch keeps returning, not because it answers every question, but because it refuses to let the hardest questions stay small. It asks whether violence is seen, whether hidden things will be revealed, and whether history has a moral horizon.